Okay, right, so I think we're live now. Sorry, there was a technical error. Right, so we're going to continue again. So back with me, Hafiz, and we're going to continue our IELTS series. And hopefully today we'll cover a little bit more about the reading section, right? So give me 1 second. I don't see that my video is live. Not sure if my video is actually live. Give me 1 second. Oh, it is live. All right, my bad. Okay, so let's begin. Okay, and we're going to continue where we left off yesterday, right? So we now have a completely different section, sorry, a different question with a different reading passage and a different type of question. Last lesson, we tried to utilize keywords on finding the answer, right? We tried to spot some 2, 3 to 4 keywords in the questions and then try to match them in the reading passage. That way, we don't actually have to try and understand comprehensively the entire reading passage. Okay, but for today, that might change just a little bit, right? Now, as a reminder, when it comes to the IELTS academic reading section, you don't have to stress yourself and force yourself to literally read the entire thing and answer and try to understand everything. What's worse is you don't need to memorize everything, right? Because it's just too much of a burden, right? You only have 60 minutes. You got to make sure that you answer all the questions and leave yourself time at the end to check that your answers are correct. And there's also a way to do that. All right, now we are going to take a look at this type of question. Right, we are going to do a question in regards to choosing the correct heading for each paragraph. Now, this is the type of questions that a lot of my students usually find very difficult, not only because it's usually tricky, because some headings can just sound the same, or it feels like it can apply to more than one paragraph, but also some headings can feel a little bit off, right? You got tricked. It's actually, it feels like it's for B, for example, but that heading is actually for A because the key words or the word that you assume, right? It's more fitting for paragraph B. So we're going to take a closer look on how to approach this type of question and ensure that we are doing it efficiently and making sure that we are thoroughly aware of the things that we have to understand and the things that we have to avoid doing or understanding even. Okay, so let's jump into the question specifically. So this reading passage is about making every drop count, so in regards to water. And then we have the first set of questions, which has a list of headings, as you can see here, right? And we need to match basically whatever paragraph is being asked and give the correct heading. All right, so here's an example for paragraph B. The correct heading is the third one. So, how a global challenge was met. And this is actually a good step when it comes to learning. We have to also understand the example question, right? As practice, of course. And of course, because this is like an example, paragraph B, the perfect heading is the third one. You do not have, sorry, you don't need to use that heading anymore, right? It's not going to be used for any of the other paragraphs. So you can kind of just skip that one for the next questions. All right, so now let's take a look at paragraph B. So I'm just going to zoom in. All right. And then we also need to take a look at what is the heading that the example said was the perfect choice. So, how a global challenge was met. Now, when it comes to this type of question, the first thing that we really recommend, right? Actually, we want to force everyone to try and do is immediately look at the heading first. Do not read the passage. So similar to what was mentioned in the previous session, where you immediately go to the question. So in this case, you immediately go to the headings, right, and try to have a thorough understanding. Not like spend 5 to 10 minutes on trying to understand every single heading, because you're not going to use every heading, of course, right? Um, but you do want to make sure that you have a clear understanding of what the heading means, because the heading indicates what I think we have all faced before, right? Is the topic, the topic of the paragraph, right? So the heading is essentially the topic of the paragraph. So what does that mean? That means the way, one of the ways to identify whether that heading suits the paragraph is by identifying the topic sentence, right? Topic sentence. Now, we have been taught a lot, in English lessons or maybe in some courses, that most of the time the topic sentence can easily come in the first sentence of the paragraph, right? That's like the usually the easiest situation you can be in, right? You read the first paragraph and you can immediately tell that's the topic sentence. With IELTS though, it's not that straightforward, right? Because the topic sentence can be easily placed in the middle or even at the end. So what do you actually need to try and do? So we're going to try and do this checking for paragraph B. So as mentioned in the beginning, we go straight to the heading. So the heading says how a global challenge was met. Now, we can still use the technique that was discussed in the previous lesson, which is highlighting the keyword first, right? But in this case, we also need to have a thorough understanding. So this is talking about a global challenge, right? A global challenge and how it was met. Okay, so maybe the approach or how it come to surface, etc., etc. So you have to keep that in mind. And last but not least, this is talking about how. Now it's very important to note the first word of the title itself, especially if the first word is like a question or a description or even an action word, right? Because that pretty much gives you a hint of what type of writing the paragraph should contain. For example, if the heading has a how, then we are looking for some sentences or phrases that indicates a method, right? That describe a method, not something that maybe describe an appearance, for example, right? Or something that describe a result, right? We want to read a sentence or a phrase that indicates it's a method because it's a how, right? So it's important to highlight those things as well when it comes to the list of headings. All right, now let's take a look at paragraph B. Right? So how a global challenge was met. Now, this is a trick that I usually like to do, right? But again, similar to the previous session, right? This is something that you will need a lot of training on. And with enough training, the accuracy can reach higher than 80%, right? So what I would do is just try to first read the first 2 to 3 sentences, right? If the paragraph is quite short, 1 to 2 sentences is usually enough, right? Just try to read that first part and then see if you can kind of identify whether the heading, what was mentioned in the heading, is also mentioned in the first 2 to 3 sentences. So let's take a look. During Industrial Revolution and population explosion of the 19th and 20th century, the demand for water rose dramatically. Unprecedented construction of tens of thousands of monumental engineering projects designed to control floods, protect clean water supplies, and provide water for irrigation and hydropower brought great benefits to hundreds of millions of people. That's 2 sentences, right? Now, if you're the type of person who easily forgets, right, feel free to check again the heading, look back at it, try to read over it as many times as you need to so it gets stuck in your head. So this is talking about a global challenge, right? So we want to find a description that talks about a global challenge. Now we can already tell from the first 2 sentences, right, that there are a couple of indication that talks about something global. Number one, the most obvious is being hundreds of millions of people. That's global, right? Hundreds of millions of people. That's global, especially considering that this was in the 19th and 20th century, right? So hundreds of millions of people is global. So we have that indication already, something global. Now, is there any indication of a challenge, right? We do. For example, here, the demand for water rose dramatically. A dramatic rise in demand, that's a challenge. Unprecedented, sorry, unprecedented construction, that's also a challenge, right? Tens of thousands of monumental engineering projects designed to control floods. That's, I think, the how, because that's what we are looking for, right? That is the how, because that is what they did, right? So this is talking about the approach. Unprecedented construction of tens of thousands of monumental engineering projects designed to control floods, right? So that is the how, right? What is the global challenge? The demand of water, right? Why is it a global challenge? Because this is something that they need to do to bring great benefits to hundreds of millions of people, right? And the how, unprecedented construction of tens of thousands of monumental engineering projects designed to control floods. Now that was discovered just in the first two sentences, right? And that's one way where you can check if your answer is correct, right? The topic sentence should be identified, right? And we can kind of see that the topic sentence is in the second sentence of this paragraph. Right? That's the topic sentence. It talks about the unprecedented construction, how they managed to met that demand, etc., etc., right? And also the global challenge part is there. So that is where the answer kind of vindicates itself. So that's how you make sure 100% that your answer is correct. That is why I mentioned this in the previous session, and I'm going to repeat it here as well. In reading, it's probably the best section where you can literally try to score the maximum, right? Because you can check whether your answer is correct or not. You might, panic in the moment while you were answering, but if you leave enough time at the end of every section in the reading section, you can check your answer in the way that we just did, right? Okay, so in that regards, right, the third heading is the correct one for B, because we did find the topic sentence, and the topic sentence did contain all of these three, right? Okay, so now let's take a look at a new question. So we're gonna try and do paragraph A, right? Now, when you kind of start this type of question, as I mentioned in the beginning, you want to look at the heading first, right? So that's what we're going to do exactly. So take some time in the beginning, right? Take some time, at most 5 minutes, just to literally highlight the keyword or the essence of each heading, right? To kind of just help you remember. And once you start reading the paragraph itself, you can immediately notice, oh, this is a keyword. This is one of the keyword that I remember highlighting in one of the headings, right? So, for example, here in heading I, scientists call for a vision of a policy. Okay, so for if there's any paragraph that talks about policy, I might need to refer to this heading, and also something to do with scientists call. And there's also a revision, so a change, right? Some sort of editing, or maybe transformations of the policy, etc., etc., right? For heading number two, we're looking for an explanation, right? So probably for a cause, or for a happening, for an accident, right? Oh, in this case, reduce water use, right? Reduce water use. So an explanation for reduced water use, but still you're looking for a paragraph in the form of explanation. And usually, once you are exposed to enough reading passage, you can tell when a paragraph is being descriptive, argumentative, explanatory, etc., etc. Right? So, those kind of things will require you to kind of just expose yourself to a lot of reading passage. Okay. All right. Now, uh, basically you got to continue doing that all the way until the end. So here we are looking for irrigation system, okay, and disuse. Now for this type of question, it does not really matter how many words you actually highlight, right? The important thing here is for you to understand, right? What is the essence of the heading? Because this is talking about the main topic of that paragraph. So you need understanding rather than matching keywords. The keywords will help you in understanding what the topic sentence should be in that paragraph. Okay, so for V, it's about environmental effects. So that could be talking about maybe consequences, causes, etc., etc. Right? For VI, financial costs, technological improvements. Okay, and it can be recent. There's something to do with health. Okay, addressing concern, increasing population, and it's a concern, right? So if we try to recall paragraph B, it did talk about increasing population, but when we read it, it wasn't a concern, right? It was more like informative. Yeah, there's now a population explosion. So if you kind of don't understand that heading in that way, you might, if the example answer was different, you might actually fall for that trap where you kind of misunderstood the essence of the paragraph. So it's very important that you actually understand the heading first, right? And then for the next one, a surprising downward trend. There's the word surprising, so the paragraph should sound like this is a shock, right? Downward trend, so it describes something that's going downward or in a downward trajectory or backwards even, right? In demand for water, that's the main topic, not the topic sentence. The need to raise standards, so it's talking about some sort of standard. So we want to look at, if we notice a description of a standard, a criteria, right? And the need, so maybe could be urgent, could be something that's just required. And last one is a description, right? Ancient water supply. So we want to find a paragraph, or when we're reading, we want to be able to notice paragraph that talks about old methods when it comes to water supplies, etc., etc. All right, now that you have done that with every heading, you can proceed to actually reading the paragraph, right? So now let's take a look at paragraph A. Now, once you have thoroughly understood the headings and you proceed to reading the paragraph, do the same steps that we did in paragraph 3. So try to understand first the first 2 to 3 sentences. If the paragraph is short, try to understand the first two, right? So let's do that right now. The history of human civilization is entwined with the history of the ways we have learned to manipulate water resources. As towns gradually expanded, water was brought from increasingly remote resources, leading to sophisticated engineering efforts such as dam and aqueducts. Now, after you read that, what do you need to do? You need to highlight the keyword that you feel are important, right? So, for example, the history of human civilization is entwined in the history of the ways we have learned to manipulate water resources. Okay, this could be important, right? There is a topic on water resources, manipulating water resources, right? It's definitely not focus on human civilization, right? Because as we have already read in the second paragraph, it focused more on the water part, right? So you want to focus on the words that are consistently used, right? Or words that with a consistent theme, basically, right? It doesn't veer away from what is being discussed. So water resources so far looking good, right? Because in the second sentence, as town gradually expanded, water, right, has was brought from increasingly remote resources, leading to sophisticated engineering effort. Okay, now we have actually a new topic here: sophisticated engineering efforts such as dams and aqueduct. Right, so there are two things: water and something to do with engineering. Now, do note, right, the way I'm saying this is to kind of just show that we don't need to be very knowledgeable when it comes to water resources, right? So, again, I'm an English student, I know nothing about water resources. So, let's see just from that two paragraph first, right? Because this is a practice. I want you guys to uh, basically see how this method was formed, right? So, now let's take a look at the headings again and see, are there any headings that kind of just correlate with those two for the time being, right? So first heading: scientists call for revision of policy. Definitely none. We did not see any policy in the first two sentences. We did not hear the word scientist. We hear engineering. Be careful, right? Because some people tend to get easily tricked by that as well. It's like, oh, engineering can be considered scientist. Not exactly, right? They're different profession. Number two, an explanation for reduced water use. Was that an explanation? Not really. It was more like a statement, right? And it's not to do with reduced water use. It's actually just to do with water use, right? It doesn't really say whether it was trying to be reduced or diminish. Number three, we already have that as an example answer, so we can skip it. Number four, irrigation system fall into disuse. We did, I think, see something like dams and aqueducts that might be used in irrigation system, but right, the heading specifically says fall into disuse. So we did not find anything that connects with the word disuse. So far, that is very unlikely. Number five, environmental effects. Now, this is quite generic, right? Only two words: environmental effects. So, in the first two sentences, we did not find any word that relates to the effects of any environment. It's just like water use, and there's an engineering that kind of helps use or utilize the water, right? That's it. So let's move. So the fifth heading sounds quite unlikely. The sixth one, the financial costs of recent technological improvement. Now, we did read something to do with technological improvements, right? Leading to sophisticated engineering. You guys can see here, right? So, but we did not see any financial costs. Now, if you're the kind of person that's not sure, that's okay, right? It's like a lot of the times, especially new students who just started to get exposed, they would go like, wait, I don't see financial costs, but there might be something here that I'm not catching that has something to do with finance. Well, don't panic just yet, right? One thing that you do need to always make sure is stick with what you're confident with first. So we are confident that we did hear technological improvements. We've only read the first two sentences, right? But we did not see any financial costs. So for the sixth heading, if we want to say, okay, we'll come back to that and check whether there's anything to do with financial costs, that's fine, right? But six is a probability. It's not a definite answer. Let's move on to the seventh, the relevance to health. Nothing to do with health, 100%. Next one, addressing the concern over increasing populations. Now, did we see any word that pertains to an increasing population? Let's take a look. Nope, we see increasingly remote resources, not population. So that is nil. So that's zilch. And then the next one, a surprising downward trend in demand for water. Again, no downward trend. It's just engineering, technology, water use. The need to raise standard. Okay, standard wise, we're not sure yet if there's any standard in that paragraph. The need, we didn't really hear a need in that first two sentences, right? Yeah, we did not. And the last one, a description of ancient water supplies. So here it's just simply a description of something ancient. Now, did we see any ancient? The history of humans. Not really just yet, right? So we didn't also see any ancient context. Now, when that happens, right? So it's increasingly likely that the answer is the sixth one. Now, how do you make sure which one is actually the right answer? Well, here's another trick. Try to read the last sentence. Now, of course, you can have that option of just reading the entire paragraph if you want. But if you're the type of person who wants to do it quickly, right, the last sentence will help you out as well. Now, fortunately, in this case, there's only three sentences, so you can read the entire thing. Occasionally, you will get paragraphs that are quite long. So if you get a really long paragraph, read the first two and then the last sentence. But in this case, we can read the entire sentence. Okay, so let's take a look at the next sentence. At the height of the Roman Empire, so this is another new topic. Nine major system with an innovative layout of pipes and well-built sewers supplied the occupants of Rome with as much water per person as is provided in many parts of the industrial world today. So this is during the Roman Empire. So what does that mean? This is actually ancient, right? So when you kind of highlight those keywords in the headings, right? You need to immediately notice those kind of things like, okay, that is something ancient. And we did see an ancient word in one of the heading, which is the XI. So now the last heading, right, the 11th heading, we actually got one keyword connected. Now, the next thing that we have to check is whether there's a financial cost because we now have two options, right? Either the sixth heading or the 11th heading. So now we check, is there a financial cost or do we only get a description of that ancient water supply? So if we really take a look again, there is no finance, right? Even if you kind of try to eyeball it, it's pretty clear that financial cause is nowhere to be found in that first paragraph, right? But if you kind of take a look at the first two sentences again, it is fully a description. It's fully a description. So in that regards, the answer to paragraph A is XI, or the 11th heading, right? That's how you kind of try and do this. Now, of course, when we did it, it was pretty slow, right? And we had to to look at a lot of things. But as you practice these steps, you will get the hang of it, and the process becomes three times as fast, right? It will take you probably more or less 2 to 3 minutes, right, to kind of immediately identify which one is is the correct heading, right? So it wouldn't take you longer than that, right? Sometimes if you get really good at it, you can immediately identify it in 1 minute, right? So remember, you have about 60 minutes, right? So you have to make sure that you answer all the questions. So per question, you cannot spend for too long of a minute. Like 1 to 2 minutes is the goal, right? Sometimes if you want to push yourself, you can try and get the answer in within 30 seconds. Like that's a big challenge, but if you practice enough with this method, you will be able to accomplish that. All right, so now let's take a look at another question, paragraph C. Okay, so let's do the same thing. Yet there is a dark side to this picture. Despite our progress, half of the world's population still suffers. Okay, so there is here a negative connotation, right? So this paragraph talks about something that's negative, right? We need to highlight always the essence of the paragraph once we notice it, right? With water surfaces inferior to those available to the ancient Greeks and Roman. Oh, this one also has ancient, right? And what does it pertain to? It pertains to water services. As the United Nations report on access to water, and this is the second sentence, reiterated in November 2001, more than 1 billion people lack access to clean drinking water. So more than one. So this is, like, um, pretty clear. This is a very bleak paragraph, right? Pretty bleak. Everything almost like negative. If you want to check the last sentence, preventable water-related disease kill an estimated 10,000 to 20,000 children per day. So officially, this is a very negative paragraph. So let's take a look back at the heading and see which heading kind of gives that negative vibe. Right? If you want to try the simple way for this type of paragraph, right? And remember, seeing whether the paragraph is something positive, negative, is also one of the ways to kind of indicate what the main topic sentence is. Right? Because so if it's a positive context, if it's a paragraph with a positive context, then the heading should be positive. If it's a negative, then the heading should be negative. So let's go one by one again. Scientists call revision of policy. Doesn't sound negative to me. And explanation of for reduced water use doesn't sound negative to me. How global challenges already used. Irrigation system, how irrigation system fall into disuse. Yes, that sounds negative, right? But wait, we haven't checked yet whether that has to do anything with the paragraph, but it does sound negative. So the goal here is for every question is you want to trim down the options as much as possible so you get like a very good chance of pinning the correct answer as quickly as possible. Environmental effects, not negative. Financial cost of recent technology improvement, not negative. Relevance to health, this one is pretty generic, right? Doesn't really say anything positive, negative. Let's say addressing the concern over increasing population does sound negative, right? A surprising downward trend in demand for water doesn't really tell if it's negative or positive. The need to raise standards doesn't sound positive and negative. A description of ancient, we already did that. All right, so there are some headings now that we've realized, right, that actually doesn't tell us whether it's positive or negative. So, for example, this one, right, this one, right, and this one, because we need more context for that. Okay, so just to actually, I'm just gonna use a different color here so that it doesn't get confused. So this one, the fourth heading, and this one, this one, and this one, and this one. So right now you have about five options, right? You have about five options to choose from. So how do we try to find the correct one? How do we narrow the options, right? So let's take a look again at paragraph C, right? What is the focus? Remember the main topic. Right? How do you find the main topic? As in any English classes, the main topic is usually the biggest picture of that paragraph, and the rest of the sentence will support that picture, right? So you have one sentence, and then the other sentence are just going to be supporting it. So let's take a look again at the first two sentences. Yet there's a dark side to this picture. Despite our progress, half of the world's population still suffers with water services inferior to those available to the ancient Greeks of Romans. As the United Nations report on access to water reiterated in November 2001, more than 1 billion people lack access to clean drinking water. Some 2.5 billion do not have adequate sanitation service. So this is like a lack of service, not a lack of demand. So this is purely a lack of service or a lack of access to clean water. Let's take a look again at our five options. Which one talks about a lack of service? Does it talk about irrigation system? No. So this one is actually wrong. Does it talks about health? Well, it doesn't really say just yet because we haven't read the last sentence. Addressing the concern over increasing population, the not increasing population, right? It's just emphasizing that there are a lot of people that does not have access to clean water, right? That's about it. But we'll keep that open, that option open just in case. Surprising downtrend demand for water? Nope, absolutely not. It's not about the demand of water, it's about access to water, right? The need to raise standard, not quite as well, right? But we need to be sure by reading the last sentence. All right, now we already have eliminated two headings. So now all we have to do is just focus on those three. And let's take a look at the last sentence to make sure. Preventable water-related diseases kill an estimated 10,000 to 2,000 children every day, and the latest evidence suggests that we are falling behind in efforts to solve this problem. So it is talking about a problem, right? It is talking about a problem. So if we take a look at the remaining answer, which is the relevance to health, right? Sorry. Okay, so the relevance to health, does that talk about the problem? Could be, right? It's related to health. The last sentence was related to health. And if we take a look at the other heading, addressing concern over that one is wrong, right? No concern over increasing population and the need to raise standard. There were no standards set in that paragraph after reading all the sentences. So it's looking very likely that the answer is actually the relevance to health, right? That's why this section is quite tricky because this is like a generic heading, right? You won't be able to kind of really guess that this is the actual heading unless you eliminate all of those the other headings that were still a possibility, right? So in this case, right, you do have to go through that process a little bit, especially if you're inexperienced with this type of question, because if you don't, like try to eliminate the all the available options like one by one, right, you might get easily trapped into something, right? Remember the relevance to health, right? That can be for any paragraph. It doesn't specify if it is a problem. It doesn't specify if it is a solution, if it's a description. It's just related to health, right? And after eliminating all the options, that's what we're left with. So it's very highly likely that paragraph C's heading is actually, sorry, right? VII, the seventh one, this one, relevance to health, right? And that's basically one way of checking, right? Eliminating and just making sure that you are 100% sure of all the options that might be a possibility. All right, let's take a look at another question in the form of paragraph D, just to be sure that you kind of can see, right? That's how you find the answer. The consequences of our water policy extend beyond jeopardizing human health. See, this one also talks about human health, right? So let's take a look. Did we actually do it correctly for C? Tens of millions of people have been forced to move from their homes, often with little warning or compensation, to make way for the reservoir behind dams. So this is about this displacement almost, right? They're forced to move out, right? They're forced to move out to make way for reservoirs. More dams and water withdrawals have destroyed the free flowing river ecosystem where they thrive. So the focus is definitely something to do with dams and water. Or I think we did highlight one word that pretty much contained those two, and that's irrigation system, wasn't it? Right? Irrigation system could be, yeah. Let's take a look and make sure. Is that the correct one? Certain irrigation, right? There's another word for irrigation. Practices degrade soil quality and reduce agriculture productivity, right? So irrigation is almost a consistent theme throughout the paragraph. Let's continue on reading. Groundwater aquifers are being pumped down faster and they are naturally replenished in parts of India. Oh, now there's a specific country, China, the USA, and elsewhere. And disputes over shared water resources have led to violence and continue to raise local, national, and even international tensions. So there are a lot going on in that paragraph, right? So in those kind of situation, the best thing to do is just make sure that you try to find a common theme, right? We did say irrigation was a common theme, but then we saw that there is soil degradation, and aquifers rep, uh, aquifers are being pumped down faster and then they are naturally replenished. So this is talking about water supply as well, right? And then in the beginning, there was talk about policies as well. Now, if we take a look at all the heading that remains, right? I'm just gonna clear my oops, sorry. I'm just gonna move this. I can't do that. All right. So if we take a look at the headings that are remaining, first, scientists call for a revision policy. Absolutely wrong. Nothing to do with that. Right? An explanation for reduced water use. Now, is there a reduced water use? Was that the common theme? Right? Let's take a look again at paragraph D. Nope, the first part was talking about water policies, people moving away from their home, right? Freshwater fish species are now threatened or endangered, so more towards environment or irrigation, right? So how global challenge met, that's done. Irrigation system fall into disuse, right? That can be an option, but it says here fall into disuse, right? Falling into dishes, so basically becoming unusable, right? So in that case, we didn't really notice that in the paragraph. Now, but we'll keep that open in case we don't find anything better. Next, the financial cost, definitely nothing there. Oh, sorry, environmental effects. Yes, there were some environmental effects as well, right? If we take a closer look again at the paragraph, right? Here, more than 20% of all fresh water fish species are now threatened or in danger. And here, destroyed free flowing river, right? And those are effects, those are environmental effects. Granted, they're negative impacts, right? But they're still environmental effects. Irrigation will degrade soil quality. That's environmental effects. So far, we found two sentences at the very least out of four sentences in total, right? That talks about environmental effects. Let's see if we can find another. Right? Disputes share water have led to violence and interest local internal tensions. Right. So environmental effects, yeah, 2 out of 4. That's not bad. So environmental effects, we'll keep that open, and then we'll check at the end which one is actually more consistent. Financial costs, nope, that's nothing to do with that. Relevant to health, we already used that. Increasing population, absolutely not. Surprising downward trend, nope, that's definitely not. There's a lot of issues in that paragraph. The need to raise standards, no standards were described there, and XI or the 11 has already been used. So we're left with two answers. Irrigation system fall into disuse or environmental effects. So we did see a theme of irrigation system and environmental effects, but did we see the word disuse, right, or a connection to the word disuse at all? No. In fact, it's actually still being used, and one of the reason why there are environmental effects is because it's being abused, right? So it's the complete opposite. So it's highly likely that our answer is actually V, because we have disproven the other options. And that is how you answer this paragraph. Now, granted, with a lot of practice, you will be able to answer this a lot quicker, right? It's about making sure that you are exposed and making sure that you are just reading on a daily basis, or at the very least, spend a couple of times per week reading something that can help you identify topic sentences, that can help you catch on important information, essential information, right? And I think one of the most important skills when it comes to reading is just to make sure that you don't easily lose focus while you're reading, especially when it comes to skimming and scanning method, because you want to read quite fast and not fail to notice important information, right? You don't want to lose focus in the midst of your reading, right? That's like a very crucial skill. All right. Anyway, that's my time for today. So thank you very much for those who have watched this session, and don't forget, right? Everything that I have explained and will, explain in greater depths and with more tips and tricks are all covered in HSAT education website, right? The description below has a link to the website. Please feel free to check out the courses that they are offering. They are offering a money back guarantee course that's really good, right? Especially for an affordable price. You guys can learn at your own pace, and if you don't achieve your goal, you get your money back, no question asked. So do check them out. And studying at your own pace is very crucial when it comes to preparing for tests like IELTS or anything similar, because let's face it, the tests are expensive, and you want to achieve the best score that you can get on the first try. You don't want to, you know, try spend too much money in repeating the tests over and over again. So please feel free to check out the link description below, and thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you tomorrow. All right, take care.